Okay, so welcome everyone to our third session of the financial education series with Dr. Stacy Bartlett. And we're happy to have her back with us today to specifically talk about post-residency financial strategies. As people are approaching halfway with being done with either residency or fellowship. And so we'll get started. Just know that there will be time after the recording to also ask questions that you might not want recorded, but also keep in mind that it could be helpful for people that can't make it. And so I'll pass it along to Dr. Bartlett. Just for those that may not know, I'm Dr. Ryan Walker. I'm the executive director of the Association of Black Family Medicine Physicians, or ABFMP, and currently practice in Lynn, Massachusetts, as a family med doc at a community health center. So take it away, Dr. Bartlett.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. It's good to see you all. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. First, I thought I had it up here and I was be able to pop right over, and now it's not showing up. 1 second. Nope, that's not right. I don't know why I can't. Why it's not showing up. There we go.
Just so you're aware, what we're seeing is Canva.
It's what? Sorry.
Canva. Oh, it stopped sharing.
Oh, okay. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, I'm gonna try to refresh this whole thing and see if it will share. There we go. There we go. Can you see that now?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. All right. So my name is Stacy Bartlett. I am a family doc as well. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm also a certified financial education instructor. So I love talking about finance things. It's a big part of what I teach the medical school and at our residency programs. So I'm excited to talk to you guys today. Right. So our objectives here, super interactive, super casual. So hopefully you'll be able to interact a bit as well. So active participants will be able to gain the skills to choose whether you want to keep, withdraw, or roll over any residency retirement funds that you might have now. Figure out if you're going to buy disability insurance before you graduate. Kind of weigh pros, cons of getting health insurance for that summer after you finish. Develop a plan for that interim period before you get your first attending paycheck, and then some basic strategies to evaluate the offerings of your new employer, wherever you're going to be going. Okay, a couple disclosures. I'm not an expert. I spend a lot of time thinking, listening, do have some training in this, but not an expert here, for educational purposes only. So not financial advice, technically. If you'd like that, you should go to a financial planner or an attorney or an accountant. It's also not comprehensive. As we've talked about before, certainly can't talk about finance in an hour. And even with this series, it's not comprehensive. There's many things we're not going to be able to touch on. But I'm happy to always answer questions. A couple people I had great conversations with offline after our last session. So certainly happy to do that. And I'll talk about some products that are well regarded that I've used, et cetera, but not technically endorsing anything. So organize this basically with a timeline. So from being in residency to attending life. And I should say, please stop me, put stuff in the chat, yell it out for sure. So starting from the winter, so kind of what we're approaching right now, and then spring, summer, fall. So we're just going to go right through that. So we'll start with the winter. So what's coming up now. So that's where you're going to sort of choose what your position. choose what your next step, do some negotiation perhaps. You really want to develop that savings plan, which we'll talk about, and then figure out what you're going to do about disability insurance. Okay, so a couple of things to think about when you're considering which job you might want to, might want to be going to might want to do post residency, kind of from a financial perspective. A big thing is community versus academics. So wondering whether you would like to be more in a practice where you're seeing patients most of the time for 4.5 days a week, or if you'd like to intersperse that time where you're seeing patients with other things like teaching or research or community work. What are the compensation models? So do you want something that's purely salary and doesn't really matter how much, quote unquote work you do? Do you want to get paid more for the more work you do? Do you want to be in a practice that's going to be, have an ownership potential where you could buy into, being a partner in the practice? So some kinds of things that would make sense for you and whoever is making the decision with you to think about what works best with your family and your kind of risk tolerance levels, et cetera. And think about what's most important to you. So oftentimes you can't get everything, but you can get most of the things, right? So is time, having a very, as close to 40 hours or 50 hours as you can, is that what's most important? Is making the most money important? Is being able to take care of a particular population most important? Location, et cetera. The values of the company or the organization. So just kind of thinking about what's most important to you. And then really, as you're going through the rest of residency or fellowship, thinking about what do you like the most and what do you like the least? What are the things you'd like to do the most more of? And what are things you really would like to not do if you could? That'll help you narrow down your job opportunities. And then the big thing that I encourage our residents to do is to try your best to talk to any potential future colleagues. So whoever's working in that office now or that you know of in that area, just talk to them and see what the reputation is, see if what they're like, what their life is like, what they don't like. You'll find that people are often more willing to share than you think. And this it's just a link to an exercise that I do with the residents to kind of think about making that decision and figuring out what's important to you, so you know kind of what to prioritize in the job search. Contracts is obviously a huge part of that negotiation. So the AMA actually has a really great, the podcast, to be honest, is not the best, but this part is really good. This contracting part is actually really helpful. So there's these 6 pretty short, like 14, 15 minutes, where they talk about the specifics of contracts and, what is the letter of intent? What are the compensation models? What's a restrictive covenant? I would highly recommend at some point before you start going on the job market, to just listen to them at some point. It's actually really, really helpful to get to know some of those terms. Okay. Questions about that at all? Does that all make sense in terms of thinking about next steps? Okay. So we'll go on to next. Okay, so a huge thing to think about that I think sometimes gets lost is that you are not going to get paid for a minute after you graduate when you start your job. So if you finish residency at the end of June, you get your last residency paycheck sometime at the end in June. If you don't start immediately, which most people are not starting immediately, most people don't start July 1st. For fellowship, you don't have a choice, but for most attending jobs, you're not going to start July 1st. And hopefully, we'll talk about this later, but hopefully you can take some time off. I would highly recommend it if you can. But that means you might go July, August, maybe September with through that month with no paycheck, right? So if you're starting work August 1st, you usually are not going to get paid until you do the work, right? So that's the end of August. So you're looking at 2 to 3 months without a paycheck. Plus, that's not a time where you're going to just be not spending any money, just, bumming around your house, right? You're going to be moving, you're going to be buying things for your new house potentially, or apartment or whatever. So it's a time of less influx and more output. So certainly need to make sure that you're developing some kind of strategy to deal with that. Okay. The moving expenses part. So your employer will often cover moving expenses. So something you can look for in a contract, you can negotiate in a contract for your next job, but it's almost always going to be a reimbursement. They're not just going to write you a check for $5,000 and say, here, have it and good luck with the move. It's going to be you can give us your receipts after you pay for the moving, or sometimes they'll do it with the company itself. They'll say you have to use this moving company and they will bill us and exactly what they are going to bill you. But most often, I would say it's a reimbursement. So you have to be able to put that money out first to then get your money back. And they're not going to pay for every expense that you're going to have when you move, right? So they'll pay for the literal moving of the stuff in the truck from one place to another, but they're not going to pay for your new furniture. They're not going to pay for you to have the person transfer your internet. They're not going to pay for that kind of stuff. So you will have those expenses too that you'll need to budget for as well. Is that all? We good on that? Okay, great. I appreciate the the head nods and the thumbs up, because it's sometimes hard to know if we're still on the right page. Okay, so to do that, you'll need to figure out a plan, right? Figure out a plan for how you're going to cover yourself for those few months. So first thing is obviously to figure out how much you're going to need. So take that stuff that we just talked about, how much you think your moving expenses will be, how far you're going, all that kind of stuff. And then figure out what your options are to get to that amount of money that you'll need to cover. So basically 4 main options for that. So one is that you just do an extra hardcore saving for the last 6 months of residency. 2 is that you could take out a loan from the bank. So you can take out a personal loan from the bank. Third thing is, if you have some generous friends or family that could front you something, you could certainly ask them. The last thing you could do is to use a 0% interest credit card. Anybody used a 0% interest credit card before for expenses? No. Okay, so the idea with that is that you're not going to be charged any interest for some set amount of time. It could be 3 months, 6 months, a year, etc. The idea is that you can spend the money on that credit card. You can charge things on that credit card, and you're going to only have to pay back what you spent without interest, as long as you pay it back within that predetermined time, 3 months, 6 months, a year. The way the banks get away with this, why they offer this credit card deal, is that as soon as that period's up, your interest rate is ginormous. It's like 27, 28%, something like that, which means that if you don't pay it all off by then, it's going to skyrocket. So if you can be super sure that you're going to be able to pay it off in that set amount of time, it can be really helpful, because you're not going to be taking out a loan that has interest, or a friend, having to pay back a friend or something, which can be ugly, right? So it can be really nice as long as you understand that you have to pay it off before that time period ends. Make sense? So if you decide that you're going to do the saving for 6 months, which is probably the hardest thing to do, but if you can do it, the most financially beneficial way to do it is if you can just save for 6 months. So how do we do that? A couple things. You could get a side hustle, right? So things like moonlighting in residency, tutoring can be super lucrative because it can be pretty flexible and a pretty high hourly rate for tutoring for STEP or MCAT or whatever you want to think you want to do. If you're saving for retirement, which would be awesome if you were with us last time, we're very pro saving for retirement in residency. If you can, you could stop that. You could pause that for 6 months and put whatever money, $100 a month that you're putting in there, and you could save that for 6 months to give yourself a little bit of a buffer. Or you could cut back on some discretionary spending that you have. So you want to totally deprive yourself and say you're not going to eat out for 6 months, you certainly could do that. If there's, a big expense that you have that you could cut out for a few months and save that money up, you could certainly do that. Whatever it is you do, that money should go in a high yield savings account. It should not be invested, because you're going to need it quickly. And we don't invest for things that we need soon. And it should not stay in your checking account, because your checking account is getting diddly for interest. So you're not making any money on that. You're losing money. So it should go in a high yield savings account where you're getting an interest rate. Right now, you should be getting an interest rate around 4.5%, 5%. All right. Disability insurance. I think you all had a session already about disability insurance, but very pro disability insurance, because 1 in 7 physicians are going to have to use their policy at some point, which is a high number. That means of the 7 of us here, 1 of us is going to have to use our disability insurance. So certainly makes sense if you can to think about doing it. It's cheaper when you're younger, which is a great reason why doing it now is better than doing it a year from now. There are a lot of resident specific discounts such that you could save a lot of money if you do it before you cross that threshold into attending life. And you can schedule your policy to start later. So if you are like, okay, I want disability insurance, as you probably heard in the other session, and I don't know if we touched on it last time either. It's not cheap. Disability insurance, when you see how much it's going to cost, you're going to be like, that's ridiculous. And I don't want to do that, which is understandable. So if you feel like you can't do, $200 a month for insurance right now, which is understandable. You can always set the policy to start in June. It takes a bit of time when you might have more money, or July or whatever, when you might have more money, but not when you've hit that attending yet. So it takes a bit of time from the time you reach out to the independent broker to get your disability insurance. You often have to do some medical exam potentially. They'll have to look at your records. You have to fill out a bunch of stuff. So makes sense to start that in the winter if you can, the process. And then you can always tell the person, yeah, but I don't want us to start paying and won't be in effect until the summer. Okay. Quick little primer on disability, which I think we talked about a little bit, but your employer, your residency has some disability coverage for you. Your new employer will have some level of disability insurance coverage for you, most likely, like 99% of the time. It's 60%, covers 60% of your income most of the time. So that means that if you were to get disabled, you could get 60% of whatever your salary is for the rest of your life. For most people, they don't want 60%. That's not that much relative to what your actual income is, right? So your supplemental is what you'd be purchasing, and that's something that will be in addition to that 60%. So it might be able to get you to like 90% of what your regular salary, and you can take it with you. So when you leave an employer, you can take that extra disability insurance with you. Using an independent broker is super important. There are these things called, because there are 5 companies right now that are able to give you specialty specific own occupation insurance, which is what you need. We don't have time to talk about what that is exactly, but that's what you need. There's only 5 companies that are able to do that for you. So you want to make sure you're using one of those. Make sure you have access to all of those. The only way you have access to all of those is to use an independent broker who can get to all 3 of them. And then riders are things that you will add to your policy. So they'll ask you, do you want to add a COLA, cost of living adjustment? Do you want to add another addition for partial disability, which means that if you're not fully disabled, but you're partially disabled, they'll still give you money. And then retirement things. Some of these are better than others. So if you want to ever talk about which ones tend to make more sense than others, we can certainly talk about that if you when you get to the stage to buy the disability insurance. Okay, so that's all the winter things. Questions about any of that?
So we're paying for the 40% potentially that the employer wouldn't cover.
Yeah, exactly. So the way disability insurance works is that you're paying a premium every month to insure yourself against getting disabled, such that if you were to get disabled, you were to get into a car accident where you can no longer practice addiction medicine, specifically, they would give you some percentage of your income in a monthly check for the rest, until you turn 65 and you get on Social Security. For the rest of your working life, they would give you that check. If you just stick with what your residency or what your employer gives you, it's likely going to be a 60% of that, of your, that you make $200,000, they would give you 60% of that for the rest of your life. Most of the time, that's what it is. a lot of people would like to have more than that, especially, because you're gonna get used to that, right? So once you start making $200,000 or 250 or whatever you're making, most people are going to live that way. So to have a dramatic drop where you're going down to, almost 50% of half of your lifestyle may not be what you and your family want to do. And so you would get the insurance so that you would know that if something were to happen to me, we could still maintain like 90% of what we're making now.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great question. Any other questions? Yeah, we can always talk more about. It's not the most exciting thing. Disability insurance is like the least sexy thing we could talk about, but it is a thing that is important to talk about. All right, so let's move into the spring. So in the spring, you're going to sign your contract with wherever you're going to go. You're going to need to decide whether you want to keep your residency retirement accounts or move them over. And then you're going to pick that health insurance coverage for the summer after you graduate. Okay, so you may have a 403B, you may have a 401k if you are at a for-profit institution, but most likely you'll have a 403B at your residency. Hopefully you're getting some level of match on it. If not, then, and you're not using it, then you can sort of skip this part, but still nice to know some of the terms. So if you have a 403B that you're contributing to in residency or that your employer is contributing some to, you have a couple options for what to do with it. So one is that you keep it. You just keep the 403B as it is. It's the easiest thing to do. You don't have to really do anything. And if your residency offerings are pretty good, like if they have good options for your retirement accounts, then it makes sense to do. Problem with that one is that you can never add any more money to it if you're no longer working there, and you can't change what it's invested in. So if you have it all invested in Apple, and then you want to be like, oh, I don't really want it to all be invested in Apple anymore, you can't change that after you leave. The second option is to roll it over to a new 403B. So if your new employer also has a 403B or a 401k, you can just, it's called rollover, you roll it over into the new one. So with that, you can keep contributing, which is good, and you can get the employer match from your new employer. But there are a few steps you have to go through with that. It's really not complicated. I've done it with a lot of residents. It's really not hard to do, but it is a few more steps than just keeping it. And you may need to adjust your investments because they may not be exactly the same as what what the residency was offering for you for your 403B investment options. Third option is to roll it over to an IRA. So an IRA is an individualized retirement account. So that is totally independent of your employer. So that you can take with you whenever, whether you're working for this person or not. That's the biggest thing is that it's not tied to your employer, but it also means because it's not tied to your employer cannot give you any sort of match on it. So they're not going to put anything in your IRA. It's your individualized retirement account. That's an option too, if you want to roll it over to an IRA. And as we talked about last time, I'm very pro Roth IRAs for residents, and for, early attending is not a bad thing also. The last option you have technically is to cash it out, but that's the worst thing you should do. Don't ever do it. It's terrible. Don't do it. Technically you might have cash, right? If you cash it out, you'll have cash, but you'll have way less cash than you should have because it's going to get taxed and penalized out the wazoo because you took it out before your retirement. So like we talked about last time, the government has some of these entities, 401ks, 403bs, that they are incentivizing. They're saying, we want you to be saving for retirement. So we're going to give you a tax break if you put it in this specific type of account in a 401k or a 403b. The trade-off for that is that you have to keep it there until you actually retire. So you can't just like take it out willy-nilly when you want to, because we're giving you tax breaks on it. So if you take it out before 59 and a half for these, they will tax it, they will penalize you. So you really don't want to cash it out if you can avoid it. If you have an IRA already, then there's nothing you need to do different, because it's separate from your residency account, separate from your employer. It's your own thing. you can do with it whatever you want, whenever you want. So you don't need to do anything if that's what you have as an IRA. And Ryan, I don't know why I can't see the chat anymore. So if anything comes up, please let me know. All right. Okay, so when we say like if the 403b is good, you should keep it. What does that mean? So a good 403b or 401k would mean that there are low fees for both the administrator and the employer. So your employer will charge you some amount of money to use the retirement account, right? It's small, but they will charge you some amount of money. Your employer, for me, it's UPMC, Mayo, whatever, wherever you are, Duke they're not in the business of giving me the retirement accounts directly. They use an administrator. So that's something like Vanguard or TIAA, which is actually who your retirement account will be kind of run through. So they also charge you something. So they're usually percentages of whatever you have in there. So if you have $1,000, they charge you 0.1% of it or 1% of it. So that's how much you'd be paying them. Some of them have higher fees, some have lower fees. So if yours has a low fee for both what you're having to pay your employer and what you're having to pay the administrator, that would be a good 403b. Also, the offerings that they're giving that your employer is providing in your retirement might be better or worse sort of suited to what you want. So if your employer is only offering really high risk things like startups in Malaysia or something, like that's pretty high risk, right? And if you're not in that space where you want to be really high risk, and that's all they're offering, then that might not be a great one, and you might want to think about rolling it over to your new employer. Conversely, if you're really trying to be really aggressive and all they're giving you are bonds, which are the lowest risk, lowest reward type of thing you can be invested in, might be worth switching to. So you want to evaluate what they're offering you. Okay. And then whether the products they're offering are doing well. So the mutual funds, the bonds that they have, are they actually, beating the market, staying with the market, or is a useful thing to use and to look at. And then is the platform they're using user friendly? Have you found it helpful and easy to use when you are if you were doing it in residency? If so, might make sense to keep it. If it was really cumbersome and not intuitive, then that might push you towards switching it over. Okay. And Ryan, you certainly should feel free to hop in here if you are available too. But because Ryan has a lot of experience with working per diem, still does. So this is something that actually I might just let you, if you do you mind, Ryan, do you want to just tell us about per diem working?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that I was not aware of when I did per diem, because I was like, I took off, so I graduated in June. I didn't start working until November. And I mostly used savings, but I did work per diem with my former residency, intermittently, like when I felt like it. But even though I was per diem, I was still considered an employee, and therefore could not I tried to roll over my retirement funds, and because I was still considered employed by them, could not roll it over. So that wasn't something I was counting on. And I still work per diem for them, so it's still there, but I won't be able to roll it over until I no longer work per diem for them. So that's just something to be aware of if you are planning to stay on with your institution, wherever you're training at, and work per diem. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. We are almost finished here, and then we'll leave it open for questions. So last thing on this, in the sort of the spring version, is thinking about your options for health insurance. So your health insurance will stop when you stop being a resident or a fellow, and it will not start until you are employed again. And so if you take any time off to travel, to rest, to do whatever, you're not going to have health insurance for that for the summer. You've really three options for what to do with that. One is you could just have no insurance. There's no federal law against not having health insurance, although some states, if you live in one of these states, Canada, California, DC, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Vermont, the state itself does mandate health insurance coverage. So is somebody going to come after you? Like, probably not, but technically it's illegal to not have some kind of health insurance coverage in those states. Regardless of the legality, it's risky, right? It's really risky for you to not have any health insurance coverage at all. If something were to happen and you had a large medical debt. Your two options, if you don't want to be that risky, are to do COBRA, which you might have heard of before. It's a federal program that's a continuation of your prior coverage. So you technically have the right to continue your insurance that you had while you were employed for a period of time after your employment. The problem with that is that you are paying both what you paid for your insurance, which in residency is probably actually not that much, and what your employer paid for your residency, for your health insurance, which is probably a lot. So what your residency paid for it, plus what you're paying for it, is what you're responsible for, which makes it super expensive. So like many hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars a month. So very expensive. What I think the most appropriate thing for most people is to go on the marketplace. So it's like, Obamacare or whatever, sort of the term, but it's going on the marketplace, which are state run. So you'll find the one for your state. When you first go on, it might say, well, you're not eligible because there's only open enrollment periods of the year, but you are eligible because you technically lost your job. You're technically unemployed. You lost your job, which is a circumstance that allows you to go onto the marketplace to get new insurance. You could consider just getting catastrophic coverage. That's actually what I did in between residency and attending fellowship/attending life, is catastrophic coverage, which just means I know that I'm not going to pay more than like $5,000, right? So if it's not, it would charge me a lot to like go get a physical, but like I just don't get a physical in July or August, right? Those kinds of things would cost a lot. Because you're not paying much for the insurance itself. So you're not paying much for the insurance itself, but they would charge you a lot if you used it, if that makes sense. So you don't want to use it if you can. It's definitely not for like things that you can avoid, but it's that catastrophic coverage such that it will cap out what you owe at like $5,000. So you know that, okay, the worst that could happen is that I have to pay $5,000 for this summer if something were to happen. Healthcare.gov is where you find that. So I would check that out. There's lots of different options there. It's pretty simple actually to just put in your information and see what your options are for health insurance coverage there. Okay. Right. So moving into the summer. So hopefully you're able to travel or sleep or move or whatever you want to do with your summer before you start your real big person job. In that time, it's worth it to think about your benefits, right? So you know where you're going. You should have gotten a benefits package, and you can kind of evaluate which of those things make sense. And then you're going to make your preliminary budget in the summer. So when you get your new job, the things you'll have to choose your retirement strategy. So what are the options? How much do you want to put into a 403b or a 401k? How much in an IRA? Which investments do you want to use for that money? Do you want to go Roth? Do you want to go traditional? Again, I would encourage you, if this is all sounds like gibberish, to look at our last session or to reach out, and we can certainly talk about that. You have to think about your health insurance. So you're going to use yours, or you're going to use your spouse's if you have one, health insurance. Are you going to go high deductible or high premium? So high deductible would be you pay very little every month. But your deductible is pretty high, so you could end up paying a decent amount. You're not going to get much coverage for basic things. Or you want to go high premium, where you pay a set amount, and you pay a lot every month, but you know that you're basically covered for everything that would have to outlay any money for. Little financial caveat with the high deductible plans. That's what being in a high deductible insurance plan makes you eligible for a health savings account, which is the sort of pinnacle, shiny, gold star, best kind of retirement option. So talk about that later, but that is something we can, that the high deductible plan will allow you to be eligible for. you have a baby or having surgery or something soon, you might want to take that into consideration when you're looking at your health insurance options as well. And then that HSA is that health savings account I was talking about, and the FSA, which is a flexible spending account, sound very similar, are quite different. Again, don't have time to talk about exactly what that is right now, but make sure you are thinking about whether either of those make sense. You have to pick your dental and vision insurance. That's pretty straightforward. Sometimes you can decline one of those as well if you want. So like I declined vision because I had LASIK and I just don't spend money on vision insurance. So I don't have that. And then extra, so that your employer might offer you disability insurance, like we talked about. They'll offer you some basic life insurance. You could also get more life insurance if you wanted to. Things like Aflac, you can consider that through for some supplemental insurance coverage as well. And then sometimes they'll have a transportation benefit where they'll pay for bus or something like that. So you want to public transportation, etc. See if you want to take advantage of that. Okay. So some budgeting things. So big picture budget when you're thinking about what that should look like. This is one of the things that I get asked a lot around this time in the spring. It's like, okay, so if I'm going to go from 60,000 to 220,000, what does that even, like, I don't know what to do. Like, how does that work? So some really basic principles to keep in mind when you're thinking about budgeting. You are likely going to be able to afford anything you want. So if you want to buy the Tesla pickup truck or whatever, if you want to go to Maui for 3 weeks, you can, like, you're going to be able to, but you can't do all of it, right? So you can't buy the boat and the 5,000 square foot house and go on the super fancy honeymoon. You can't do all of it, but you can probably do any of those things you want to do, which means you have to decide what's important to you. So is travel important to you? Is the new house important to you? Is the car important to you? Is giving important to you? Is helping out your parents or your family or whoever? Is that what's most important to you? Like, just figure out what the most important thing is to you and then start there, and that be your kind of big thing. Consider increasing your quality of life by just 10 to 20%. So don't, if you can, really don't. The sort of worst strategy would be, I'm just going to max out my lifestyle now, and I'm just going to buy the giant house, buy the 3 cars, do all the things that they get me to the max of that, 220 or whatever that you're going to make. A 10% or 20% increase is a pretty decent amount. So if you're used to bringing home, $5,000 a month in residency, and then you're now going to bring home like $20,000. Well, not going to bring home, but $20,000 is what you would be making as an attending. That's a huge jump. So if you were to take just like 10,000, 12,000 of that difference, right? So if you took say you're making $10,000 more than you did a month before, which could certainly be the case for you from attending life to residency life. 10-20% of that is another extra $1,000 or $2,000 a month, right? So what kind of apartment or house could you get for an extra like $1,000, $2,000 a month? Like a pretty decent one. Your car payment should not be anywhere near $2,000, right? But you could get a nice car, right? For not even $2,000 a month, right? Hopefully not. So you can still upgrade your life, but think about what that 10 to 20% would be, and think about, okay, that might be my budget for this first year. Like, I'm going to not just live exactly like I am right now. I'm going to upgrade, but I'm not going to blow it. So what is that 10 to 20% that you could think about upgrading? Concentrating the big expenses. So I really hate when people are like, well, you just stop going to Starbucks and then you'll be good. Like, you make no other financial decisions, just stop going to Starbucks and it'll be enough to get you out of debt or whatever. It's not. The big expenses are what matter. So your house, your car, your whether you're supporting other people, other things, those are like the big expenses that are gonna make the big difference. So you want to concentrate on keeping those in a good place, and just know that you're building your foundation, right? So what you do in these first few years after residency really are crucial for how you're going to build your financial life going forward. So just know that the strategies, it's worth putting the time and energy into it right now to really get a good foundation for that. Last thing I will say, little just sort of pearl, if you get a signing bonus, one of the things that can be helpful is to use that for a financial planner, for a financial advisor, because you're often getting that signing bonus in the spring-ish, like after before you graduate, right? Hopefully you're not crazy busy. You're third year, or I guess you're ending a fellowship, but you're busy, but hopefully not quite as much as you were like intern year, second year, et cetera. But you also have you know where you're going to be going, right? You have some of the things that a financial advisor is going to want to know: what your income's going to be, where you're going to be living, what retirement options you have, that kind of thing. So if you get a $10,000, $20,000 signing bonus, like consider using a chunk of that to have a financial planner kind of set up a plan for you. It's kind of a good time to do it, and that money you hopefully haven't spent yet, right? You have it just kind of additional for you.
How much does a financial planner like typically? I don't know. I just reached out to one today. My friend said to talk to him, and but like how much, like how do they get paid? Like just by
Good question. Yeah. Yeah, beautiful question. And we're actually going to do a session on just that, on financial planners and accountants and all of that. But it's just a huge variation. What you're going to see is the people who are going to come at you right now are going to say it's free. They're going to say, we don't charge you anything. Always be skeptical if somebody says something, they're going to be saying for you for free, right? What do they actually want out of this? If you were to actually go to one who wasn't doing some sort of gimmicky, like, you can come for free and I'll do everything for free, it's going to be a couple $1,000s. So if you were to just like say, here's my whole situation, can you develop a plan for me? Like, this is where you should put all your money. This is where you should be investing it. This is where you should be saving it. This is how long, you should need to save up this much for your down payment. I would set the expectation that you're going to spend about $2,000 to $3,000 for that.
Okay.
Which sounds like a lot, I know, but if it's a good plan where they spent many hours, they give you, a lot of times they'll give you multiple scenarios. Like, if you wanted to spend this is what this would look like. If you want to do this is what it would look like. So it's a big number. It's a big investment, but it can be really helpful just to kind of get you set up. And then you don't necessarily have to keep them. Some people will, because they just don't want to do any of it. So they will keep that financial advisor. Some people will just do that initial, like, look at everything, figure out what I need to do, and then kind of let it go from there.
Okay.
So if you have a $20,000 signing bonus, it's a decent chunk of that, but it's not a huge chunk of it. So if that's something you have available to you.
Yeah, like for signing bonuses, I know like most like do you know generally how much they get taxed? Like 45% of it, or
depends on your tax bracket.
Oh, bracket. Okay.
So yeah. So it's a good question. So yeah, so that's important though. I think not a lot of people, some people are like, oh, look, I got this $20,000 signing bonus. I'm going to buy a $25,000 X and that'll be solid. Super great that you recognize that is not what you're going to get. It's going to be taxed. You should bank safely. Just say, I'm going to get half of that, maybe 2/3 of it. And then you can be happy when you have a little bit more, but certainly would not expect you to have any more than like 60, 70% of it after taxes and all the things that were going to come out of it. I would say just bank on having under 3/4 of it. Yeah, all great questions. Okay. Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I ask a quick question, or should I wait till the end?
No, please go for it.
Okay. Just going off what you were saying about hiring like a financial assistant or advisor. So do you discuss in any of your sessions about hiring like your own personal medical attorney? Because I was told that by an attending, and I just want to know if like you discussed that at all.
Yeah, so we haven't talked about it specifically, but that's one of the things they talked about in that AMA. I don't know if you were here for that. It was something we talked about really early, but there's the AMA has actually a really good series. It's like an hour for the whole thing. They're just really like 15-minute kind of snippets about contracts and negotiation. And there's a whole section about hiring someone and what to look for if you're going to hire someone to kind of look at your contract and help you in the negotiation process. So is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about something different?
No, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Just really just like how, or like when is the best time to kind of seek that out, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So early, I would say, when you're thinking about what kind of jobs you want to look at. Some people will say you don't really need one until you're past the letter of intent stage. So typically the way it would work is that you look for jobs, you apply, you interview, and then you get what's called a letter of intent. And a letter of intent is basically a sketch of the job. So where it is, how much you're going to make, like maybe some vacation days, basics of the payment structure. That's basically it. And it's not a contract, it's just a letter of intent, and that is technically not binding. So that is usually where people are going to bring in an attorney, but I wouldn't start looking for one after you have a letter of intent, right? Because you might want to talk to a couple, you might want to talk to some people who've used other attorneys. So I would start the process of looking for the attorney when you start looking for the job. And then you may not actually like employ them, use their services until you're in that letter of intent stage. And I will say there are also different levels of involvement that you can have them do. So if the lowest version you could have an attorney do is just look at it. You just send a contract over, your contract over, and they just kind of mark it up or give you a list of questions that they would recommend you ask. That's kind of the lowest you could do. And you can get that for a couple $100s. The highest amount of involvement you could do is that they were actually negotiating on your behalf. That's going to be several $100s an hour for that. So that's going to be a lot more. But if you have someone who is actually doing the interacting with the employer, that's going to be kind of the highest level of involvement you could have. And then there's obviously things in between.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. And I will check that out on the AMA, see if they have something. And thank you, Ryan, for that book recommendation in the chat. Thank you. And you're talking about like post-residency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that book is Ryan sent me that book too. And it's really, it's quite good. So yeah, it's super quick read. So it'll take you like a couple of days to read it. So, but yeah, that I would definitely recommend the podcast, just that hour long for the AMA, and then certainly read the book as well. But yeah, that's a great question. And that's also something that will cost you money, right? That you won't have yet. So you're gonna need to try to budget for that too. When you are thinking, of the last year of residency, that you're gonna, if you decide you want to have an attorney, that you'll need to have anywhere between $200 and $2,000 for that. Okay, so hopefully you're able to sketch out a budget before you start your job, right? So you want to figure out, what do you think you're going to need for this job? So you want to start with your savings and investment goals. So how much do you want to be saving? So do you want to be saving 20% for retirement? Do you want to have a $20,000 down payment in 3 years to buy a house? Do you want to put $200 a month toward a vacation fund? Like what are your goals for saving and investment? Start there. And then take out the fixed expenses that you'll have. So what are your student loan requirements? What's your disability insurance payment? Take that out from as well. And then you're going to work from there to see what you can afford. So then once you figure that stuff out, then you can say, all right, I'm moving to Charlotte. It looks like I can probably do $2,000 a month for rent. What will that get me? And then, you say you have this much, however much your car payment is, et cetera, figure out what your entertainment budget is from there. But start with your savings and investment goals. What do you want to be able to save and invest? And then kind of go from there. What to look out for when applying for fellowship. So we don't at the moment, but we certainly can think about doing things. I always, I think, I don't know, a couple of these things have come just from people asking in other sessions. So we certainly could think about doing something from a fellowship perspective. It's a little bit different because all fellowships are, kind of different. So what to look for in a sports fellowship is going to be different than an OB fellowship, right? But the basics of like culture and talking to people and that kind of thing that we talked about in the beginning would certainly apply for fellowships as well. For OB fellowship, awesome. It's probably the one about which I know the most, just because we have one here that I'm involved in. So can certainly talk about OB fellowship things. Okay. All right, and we've come to the fall, our last season. So The fall, you're just going to adjust your budget. So you're now working, you've worked for maybe a month or two. You're going to see, is that budget actually whatever I set up before, is that actually working for me? So the way that I would recommend doing that is just to see what you're spending over these first few months of your new life and see if it fits within a budget rule. Now, it's a rule is kind of sounds very strict and cut and dry, but it's a guideline, right? So it's a 50-30-20 budget rule, which is my favorite rule. There are other ones out there, but this is my favorite one. It basically means you're going to spend 50% of your money on fixed expenses. So your housing, your utilities, your car payment, you're feeding yourself, things that are kind of are not going to change. You're going to try to spend 30% on this flexible spending. So that's dining out, clothing, it's entertainment, it's travel. And then 20% of your money should be going toward savings and debt repayment. So building your emergency fund, which we hope to be about 3 to 6 months of expenses, your retirement accounts, your student loans, your credit card debt, servicing that. If you are within this range, typically you're in a pretty good spot. If you're way outside of that, such that like your flexible spending is 50% and your, savings is like 5, then think about how can I readjust this to get closer to this 50-30-20, to get myself in a better spot. Okay. So you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna get your credit cards, get your debit card statements, figure out where get your paycheck, so you know how much is coming in, see what you spent, assign each expense to one of those places. Is it a need? Is it a want? Or is it a wealth building, which is that savings part, building your net worth, building your wealth? And then is that in that 50-30-20? And you might have to adjust it over the next few months. This can be really tedious. There are a couple apps that are wonderful. One is NerdWallet, which is free, which I really like, can help with budgeting specifically. And there was an app called Mint. There still is technically an app called Mint, which I loved and I think was loved by a lot of people in the sort of financial community. That unfortunately is going away in January. So it's still on there now. So if you still want to do it, you certainly could try for now. It was free and you could do not just budgeting, but it could track your investments. It could do lots of set your goals and would help you figure out how much you need to save to get to them. It was beautiful. But it was free and didn't make any money, and therefore it's going away. There are other options that do similar things to that almost all of them cost money. So I have been trying out a few of them with like sort of free trials right now from transitioning from Mint. Right now, my favorite is one called Monarch. If you're thinking about a way to track your budget, it's like $100 a year, which is, more than free, but not outrageous. And yes, as Ryan said, NerdWallet is like my favorite for so many things. So if there's a concept that you don't know, if there's a word, someone says high yield savings, or someone says annuity or bond market, or I don't know, any kind of mortgage related thing, like there's any term that you come across that you're like, I don't know what this is, NerdWallet is my first place to go to get an explanation because they are really good at it. So if you have something that comes up, like, I think I should probably get X thing or know more about this thing, go there, start there to figure out to get the basics of what it is. And then if you're looking for credit cards, for CDs, certificates of deposit, if you're looking for savings accounts, looking for providers for investment brokerage accounts, all that kind of stuff, they have a really great comparison tools and ratings and things like that. So I love NerdWallet. So if you have any financial question, certainly that's the first place I would go. I'm also here, obviously, if you need anything. I'm happy to answer some questions, but any questions, but love NerdWallet. Okay, that's all I have. Did I make it? I made it, 7:59. Okay, perfect. Happy to answer any questions that anybody has, if there's anything that we did not talk about.
And I'll just remind people we will have time afterwards to also ask questions offline if people prefer to ask questions not recorded.
And this is my email, so please feel free to reach out if you have anything, any questions that we didn't talk about or want more information on anything.
How do you just about the lawyer, since we were on the subject, like I know I was talking to one of my advisors, he's a psychiatrist, so Psychiatry Association, I think it's AP, I can't remember. But he was saying like they for a free service they'll have a lawyer look at two contracts of yours. Is there anything similar to like ABFM or family medicine, or will they have a lawyer
Hmm.
look at a couple contracts for free?
Yeah. Do you know of anything, Ryan? I don't know of anything from the AFP.
Um, I can ask. So I was going to mention because our next session is the contract drop-in. We did do a session with a lawyer earlier this year. So I was going to talk about watching the recording, and she has offered to ask questions. I'm not sure if she's like offering to review contracts for free necessarily, but she was very open to ask questions.
Okay, got it.
That's great
Okay,
that the
thank you.
AFP does that. That's very kind.
Yeah,
Yeah, she was really good. That was a really good session because she actually, in that session, we used a real contract to go through. So one of our board members used their contract and basically she like wrote it up, highlighted it. So you almost are getting free contract advice just through that session. So
Yeah, that's great. That's great. But I will say if free is obviously the best, but this is a huge thing, right? It's a lot of money and you're stuck with this for, however long you sign your contract, 1 to 5 years. So spending a couple $100 to have somebody look at it is actually probably a pretty good investment for this type of thing.
yeah, and I think one thing that I learned from the book is that by Dr. Simpson was like one of the more important things is like how to get out, like a lawyer knows best how to actually truly get out of your contract if you ever want to get out of it. Which is not always highlighted in the contract. It's a lot of conversation about like how they can let you go, but not a lot of language about how you necessarily let them go, other than like giving them notification in X amount of days or what have you. But even if you decide to leave an institution, knowing what your options are when you leave is really important because some people have like you can't like practice within a certain radius of where you used to work or will no longer work. So, and I think it's also very situational where you work as well, like academia versus private practice, and community health centers are very kind of standard a lot of times. So I think that also plays a big role.
And guys, your question was, I unfortunately don't have a lot of immigration lawyer experience. So I would not be a good person to ask, unfortunately, for that.
Neither do I. I think that would be a great question to ask in the ABFM group me. If you're not already part of the general group me, I can share the link of how to join to see if because we do have a significant number of IMGs. I don't know if they're the attending level or not. But if we did have a session last year on like all the visas. So there's like an informational session on like all the visas, and it was like done by someone who works predominantly just with IMG. So that might be informative, but I don't know a specific lawyer.
Awesome. Okay. Questions? Anything else that came up or even something that didn't come up here money-wise that you'd like to talk about?
Right. So what I'll do is just have a few announcements that I'll share, and then I'll stop recording, and then people can proceed with questions that they don't want to be recorded. So I just wanted to show that our next session of the financial education series is going to be on the 12th of December. It's going to be a contract review drop-in with Dr. Barlett, where you can just ask questions about your contracts. And for those of you that may not be familiar, if you go to abfmp.org and then members only, you have to be logged in. We don't charge anything for membership. We really just care about sharing information and creating community. So just create a account and then go to members only here at the top right, and calendar events. So you can basically just add this to your calendar. To have that information automatic. And then this is the recording that is available about job contracts that we did with the lawyer that I spoke about. This one is a private recording, which you can find under members only, as well as the disability insurance that you can see at the bottom left there. And then lastly, we have leadership positions that are open. So we just opened up applications if you're interested in applying. The deadline is going to be December 22nd. And we would love to have you guys get engaged and join us. We are always looking for more ideas. And if you are interested, you can just go to our website, go to home and leadership opportunities, and apply there. That's all I got. Thank you all for joining us. And then I'm just gonna say good night and stop recording.